Hey everyone, I am Jill Griffin, your host of the Career Refresh, and today I have Celeste Warren. She has spent 25 years inside global Fortune 100 companies, rising to vice president and chief diversity and inclusion officer. She's built the system, she's had the conversations with C-suite leaders that you definitely want to hear. And since retiring, she has founded a consulting firm. She's co-founded a nonprofit supporting students of color and STEM, or excuse me, in STEM. And she's also published her second book, which we're going to talk a lot about today, The Truth About Equity. I will have the information for her book and where to find her and her website in the show notes. So definitely check that out. Her book is available on Amazon and throughout major booksellers. So today we are unpacking equity as a career navigation strategy. When Celeste and I first started talking about this, I found this to be fascinating, and I was really, really excited to bring this conversation close to you because we often think about it as a corporate initiative, and that's wonderful, and it should be, right? But this is about you, the individual, as a leader, whether you're leading others or whether you are the leader who wants to continue to navigate within the workplace. So this is your strategy. And with that, let us welcome Celeste Warren.
Well,
Welcome.
thank you. Thank you, Jill. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Awesome. Awesome. Really. Okay. So let's just get right in. You've said that equity is a career navigation strategy, and this really was what piqued my interest, not just a
Mhm.
corporate initiative. So, for a senior professional who may be listening, and folks, as you're listening or watching, you probably want to grab that notes app or grab pen and paper because I already know that Celeste is going to be hitting you with things that you definitely want to take note of and put into action this week. So, if you are a senior professional who feels like you're hitting that ceiling, what do you think the difference is between an equity problem, an influence problem, or a
Mm.
performance problem? How do they know?
Yeah, so performance is what I like to say is what your functional discipline and your leadership. So if you're in the C-suite and you're a leader and you have command of an organization, it's about how you perform each day. You know,
Okay.
you set objectives, you set priorities, you are responsible for the performance of your team. So that's more of a performance standpoint. And at the executive level, it really is highlighted because they look at, are you able to lead? Are
Yeah.
you able to
Are you hitting your goal or not? So it's more
Yeah,
prescriptive.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
And then from a equity standpoint, for me, equity is how you get that discretionary effort from individuals in your organization, which leads to better team performance and better organizational performance. Because from an equity standpoint, you're meeting people where they are because everyone didn't start on your team didn't start in the same place.
Hmm.
So you have to really understand where they started from, where what they're about. So beyond the skills and capabilities, you have to talk about that. You have to understand, where they are from that standpoint, but also from the standpoint of their life experiences, their culture, or their identity, how that factors in to who they are as a person and how they are performing. Because sometimes you need to understand what's beyond the functional skills and capabilities
Sure.
to what is really going to optimize their level of performance. That sense of belonging, that sense of you really see me as a leader,
Mhm.
you really understand my value as a leader, and I appreciate that you see me, you understand my value, you see what my skills and capabilities are, but I trust you because you have a vested interest in my career, in my abilities, and you make me feel valued just by how you show up and you treat me every day.
Okay.
That's where you get the discretionary effort. That's where you get the individuals that are they're ride or die with you.
Okay.
That's when you get the individuals that are going to stick with you when you have to go up that hill, when you have to have those hard messages during challenging times in the business. They're with you. And I
Okay.
think that's the difference.
Okay. So then let's take a step back and define for everyone what equity is in your
Yep.
definition.
So I like to use it from the standpoint of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity is simply differences in people, those you can see and those you can't see. Inclusion, you want to surround everyone with that culture of inclusion because with all of those differences, different perspectives, different identities, different life experiences, you need to get them to a collective purpose, which
Mhm.
is usually the mission or vision of that organization. In order to do that, you surround them with this culture of inclusion so they have a sense of belonging, and you get all of those different people with all of those different perspectives and identities to that collective purpose. Now, equity is you have all of these different people, as I said, from different starting points. What do I need to do? Those acts of equity are those things that you need to do to get them to that collective purpose. And you have to meet people where they are and understand what it is, what are those obstacles and barriers that are getting in the way from them getting to that collective purpose,
Mhm.
and then help to blow those away as
Okay.
a leader. So that's what I'd like to just very pragmatically say what equity it is.
Okay. Okay. So really, really helpful. Maybe if you could give an example,
Mhm.
what would be an equity example for someone who's from a historically marginalized community, and then
Yep.
maybe an example from somebody who is disabled, right? If you can
Yep.
give different
Well, what
examples of
I'll
what
do,
equity might
Jill,
look like.
I'll use an example that I use, and everyone has heard, which kind of puts it in perspective. Everyone's heard of seen the rocks and the fences
Yeah.
illustration
Yeah.
before, right?
Yeah.
Where it explains it. And so I use it in a little bit of a way that goes a little bit deeper. So, that first illustration, for those of you that are listening that haven't seen it, there's an illustration that Deloitte actually started. And the first illustration is, everyone's standing on one rock and there's a fence in front. The person on the right still can't see over the fence. Person in the middle barely see over the fence. Person on the left can see over the fence. In the second illustration, they've given the person on the right two additional rocks, three rocks, so they can see over the fence. The person in the middle has one additional, and so they can see over the fence. The person in the left still has the one rock because they were always able to see over the fence. Now, what's happening now is the person that was standing on one rock in both those illustrations, they're turning to their right and they're saying, well, how come they have three rocks? They have two rocks. I only have one. That seems unfair. And so the acts of equity are the rocks that were put in place. And a lot of the diversity and inclusion practitioners and leaders, and also just leaders in general, they've done the work in putting the rocks in place, the acts of equity. So everyone can have access to opportunities, career aspirations, performance, etc. So they put those things in place, whether that be person with a disability, they maybe they need an accommodation, and so what am I doing to provide them access to an accommodation so they can perform and be productive? As an example, the woman who is feeling marginalized because her work is not being recognized in the workplace. What are we doing to make sure that she has a sense of belonging and feels valued as a leader? What am I doing to make sure that she feels accomplished and
Right.
valued for the work that she's doing?
Right.
Whether that be through performance reviews, through ongoing feedback, et cetera, the assignments that I give her.
Hmm.
So those are the acts of equity. But at the same time, that fence is there. And the fence represents all of those isms, the
Hmm.
things that are longer term, that have been there for decades, in years, decades, hundreds of years. And they're going to take a longer time to try to pull apart. So racism, sexism, homophobia, all of those different things. And so the person that was standing on one rock in both illustrations, they're looking and they're saying, I don't understand why they're standing on those rocks, because they don't understand that the fence is there
Right.
and how it manifests itself in behaviors to his colleagues on the right. So
Hmm.
we have to do the work of putting the acts of equity in place, the
Hmm.
rocks. We have to do the harder work of tearing down the fence and the strategic and longer term work. We also have to have a conversation with that individual who was standing on one rock to say, help them to understand the fence is there for whatever reason, your life experiences, whatever it has been, you've been able to see over the fence. You don't understand how it manifests itself to your colleagues to your right. And then also, not just helping them to understand it, but getting them to get in the boat, grab an oar, start rowing, and be active allies to help us, because we can't do this work alone. It has to be done in congregation with other people.
Hmm.
something as like succession planning, right?
Mhm.
In a hiring situation, if you're using panel interviews as opposed to one-on-one interviews, so the candidate comes in, they interview with Jill, they leave her office, they go interview with Bob, they leave his office, etc. Using panel interviews where everyone has the structured interview guides, you're asking the same questions of each candidate, where you're able to sit in the same time, the interviewers hear the answers of the candidates, and then have discussions about the candidates, because you can challenge each other, and you can say, well, when I interviewed Jill, I didn't really like that answer that they gave about how they started. And then the other leader can challenge you on it and say, well, what didn't you like about it? Because here's what I heard.
So
And
I
instead
hear
of
you
being that,
saying that the panel interview would
yes,
benefit this situation.
yes. Some companies, I can remember years ago, they didn't post jobs, and it truly would be a who you knew
Right, right.
process.
I
When
guess
I,
the challenge that I would have in that is that
yep,
if I'm, if I just think about any of my previous when I worked within a large company, I
mm-hmm,
might be on a daily team of 5 or 10 people, part of a larger org that might be 50 people. I just
mm-hmm,
might naturally know because I work with that colleague so often that, they've hinted that they're thinking of leaving and I just might know, but we haven't announced it yet because there's no plan in place.
okay.
That's not necessarily intentionally excluding anyone. It's just the natural course of conversation. So how would you suggest someone who's if they're in that scenario, they would handle something like that?
Well, so just from my experience,
Yeah.
you go, let's just play this out. So you go to the manager, the
Mhm.
leader, and you say, well, I heard through the grapevine that there might be an opening on your team. Now, the blowback, and I've seen this so many times,
Right.
the blowback is that manager starts getting paranoid and thinking, okay, they may not even have a clue,
Yeah,
right? So you may have
that's
a
kind of what I'm
relationship.
getting at. I mean, there were
Yeah,
times in which someone would resign and it would be in total lockdown because we wouldn't want employee morale to be impacted,
right.
or if we didn't have a proper succession plan for the client or the business, we didn't want the market or the client to get worried. So it would be like, don't talk about it until we have an idea in place. So again,
Yeah.
those are natural things that would happen in business. It's not meant to exclude anyone, but the
Hmm.
structural bias inherent in that ends up excluding. And that's kind of where I'm saying, so like,
Yeah, well,
no one's
yeah, that's
doing it
why.
intentionally, but how do you get around that?
Well, you get around it if it's a executive type level, then that's where the
That's,
succession plan
yeah, I
process
can
comes
see
into place,
that
right?
being a
If
succession
it's
plan.
at the
Sure.
director or manager through the
Yeah.
organization,
Yeah.
then I mean, I would first ask that person who has sort of hinted that they're going to leave, well, do you think that I could be someone who viable for your role? And have that conversation and say, well, how
Mhm.
comfortable are you with me going to the boss and saying, hey, I'd really like to be considered for
For
this
this.
role because I
Hmm.
know they're getting ready to leave. Because it's just going to cause havoc if you go to the boss and that person hasn't talked to
Oh
their
yeah,
boss for
you've
3 weeks. You know
also
what I
betrayed
mean?
a confidence, of
Oh
course.
my God,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I've seen that 50,000 times.
yeah, yeah.
And so that's where I would go and I would say to the manager, if everything is copacetic and you've had the conversation and everything's transparent, what are you looking for?
Hmm.
What skills, what capabilities, how many years of experience, all of the characteristics, do I have what is needed for this role, do you think? And then having that conversation. There's nothing wrong with having that conversation. If the manager says, well, actually, I don't know if you would be the right person for the role, that's when you turn it into employee development conversation to
Sure.
say, okay, well, let's have a conversation about what you feel is missing from my experience, and then how do I get it?
So you've talked a bit about, being included versus being influential. How,
Hmm.
if I'm in those buckets, how will I know? Am I just being included, or am I actually having the impact that I want to have as an employee and a leader?
Yeah, well, in email language, are you in the two line or the CC line?
Okay.
um, so if you're just being included, you're there. you're there in the discussion and no one's really asking your opinion. You can tell when someone really when you're an influencer.
Hmm.
The difference is an influencer when you're in a meeting and someone is looking to you asking your opinion on things and the room is quiet when you talk
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
they're people are writing notes and this and that and blah blah blah. They're listening to what you say. They're writing. It's incorporated in the output of whatever it is that you're discussing. It's repeated by the person who's asking you the question. So what you're saying is XYZ da 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 da. And there's a dialogue that's happening that is an integral part of the work product of and the outcomes that you're having the meeting for. The person who's just there is just there for whatever reason. And I've been in those meetings where sometimes you're just sitting there like, okay, well, why is this person here? I can remember having conversations with some of my managers and directors and saying, okay, these are the people you've invited. Well, why is this person coming? Oh, well, they have an interest. We have to get stuff done and make decisions.
Right,
So we need
right.
the people there that have skin in the game. And the decision that we make is going to have an impact on their department, their product, their strategy, etc. So that's the difference, I think, between someone who's just included versus someone who is an
Right.
influencer.
And on 2 points on that, I can see if someone is new to their leadership role, they're hearing diversity, equity, inclusion. They're saying, I included them because you're telling me I should be including people.
Mm,
So they're
no,
doing
yeah.
that, but they need to think through, is what you're saying. I think I hear you saying, is they need to think through,
Yes.
include them, yes, but what is the goal that you want to get? You want their opinion on this particular project, you want their point of view, you want their lived experience. Like, finish that
Hmm.
thought. You're not just including them. I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's what I was
No, that's exactly
saying.
it. Why are they in the room?
Okay.
What value are they bringing when they come in the room?
So again, we've talked a few times about how equity is a strategy. If I'm the employee, how can I use that as a strategy for my career?
So, in the employee standpoint, as a strategy, understand first you have to be grounded in who you are.
Hmm.
That is that is so critical for you to be grounded in understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, your areas for development, all of that stuff. Understand it. The equity comes in where you're sitting with that your manager and that person who can help you and help you in your aspirations and it's making sure that they understand where you are and
Hmm.
the acts of equity that you need to
Hmm.
help you to thrive, not just survive but thrive in the environment. And so you have to own it. You have
Hmm.
to own, okay, I have, for example, I have this challenge where I have a special needs child at home. I am responsible for this project or this initiative. These are my strengths. These are my areas of development. From a life experience standpoint, I need to be home by 4:30. I have to make sure that I'm with my child. I have to make sure that I have certain structures that are very important in their life, and I need to make sure that I'm putting that structure in place. So I need to leave. But oh, by the way, that isn't a limitation on what I can do and the value that I can bring to this organization. Because here's what I do. I do, maybe I do this when I get home, and then as soon as they're in bed, I'm getting online and I'm doing X, Y, and Z. So my work day isn't as conventional as my peers, but I'm still judge me on my output of my work and the quality of my work and not when I'm doing the work during the
Right.
course of the
Right.
day. So
And
that's
I
just an
think that, I
example.
mean, that's valid. I think we have a long way to go there. It's funny, I was talking to a client who recently went from basically has spent her career in more independent shops and more small business, and has just made the jump and is now working at one of the Magnificent Seven, right? So one of the big tech companies that we all know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have permission to share this. And in her travels, she's really trying to regulate her nervous system, where she's like, no one cares where I am right now. Like, I'm not, and I keep having to tell her, and like, she's senior. She's not used to not having to report in. She's used to being managed for productivity and
Mm-hmm.
busyness. and
Mm-hmm.
not being managed for the
Mm-hmm.
value that she creates. So now she's in an organization where they don't really care where she's sitting, if she's at her assigned desk or if she's going to work from home this morning to avoid traffic or what have you.
Uh-huh.
They're talking to her about the value she's creating. And it's such an amazing step change to see that because I think we've all been in organizations where someone is almost like making you punch time codes. And that works depending on how you're classified from an HR standpoint, right?
Yes.
It is very important that we are honoring classification of employees if you are being paid hourly or you're deserving overtime. That's not what we're talking about, folks. We're
Yeah.
talking about someone who is a salaried employee, but still being treated by, and this happens more often than not, that like, well, what do you mean you need a day off? And it's like, no, you've already worked this month so many extra hours that it should almost be a comp day, right? Versus
Yeah.
actual
Yes.
day off. So navigating that, I think, is really interesting. And I agree with you, but I think as leaders, we have a long way to go to be shifting our mindset and then also being clear to the people that we're overseeing as leaders to what does value-based management by objectives or MBOs, what does that actually look like? And listen, if you can do it in 25 hours or it takes you 45 hours, at the end of the day, I probably don't care as long as I
Mm-hmm.
get what I need. And I think we have a lot of work there to do within
Mm-hmm.
organizations to stop
Mm-hmm.
strangling us to, butts and seats and busyness versus what's the value?
Micromanaging.
What's the
Yeah.
value?
Don't tell me how to go from A to B to B to C to C to D. Tell me where Z is
Hmm.
and when you want Z, and I'll get there. And if I
Yeah.
have any problems, then I'll come to you. Um, you know, we don't have the conversations at the beginning of the manager employee relationship. So when you first get at the job and here's my manager sitting down and they used to call them manager employee contracts. And it's like, let's just have a conversation. Here's my working style. Here's what I do. Here's when I do it. Here's how I am. And what's your management style? What's your
Yeah.
communication style? And having that adult conversation when you first get in the job, so they understand who you are and the essence of who you are, and it's a lot easier to build that relationship down the line.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
would
many
actually
people
even
don't do
say
that.
have that. I mean, if you're already within the organization, you're getting rotated, that's one thing, or you're getting promoted to a different department, that's one thing. But if you're in the job interview process, I would actually bring that into the job interview. Maybe not on the
Mm,
first round interview, but as you're progressing in your conversations, either in time or in frequency, I would actually have a conversation. I mean, I've asked many a times when I've interviewed for jobs to the person I would be reporting to, what annoys you?
yeah,
Like to really understand like what are your pet peeves and how do you like to work? And like it's it's about competency, but it's also about chemistry, like
yeah,
to understand that. Okay, last
and
question.
character too.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Okay, last question. You have a line within your book about performance gets you paid and sponsorship gets you promoted.
Hmm.
Give people a little understanding, especially if they've never had a sponsor before.
Yeah.
Every organization kind of defines it a little bit differently, but there are some key tenets of it. So give us an idea of what does that mean and how do you build it?
Yeah. So sponsorship is you don't pick a sponsor picks you. So you can pick a mentor. And the reason why I say that is a sponsor is that person who behind the scenes in those rooms when they're having talent discussions, when they're having succession plan discussions, when they're having talent reviews, they're talking about you in a way that is very favorable, that really puts you in a light where, if I'm going to be on an island, I want Jill on that
Mhm,
island with me,
mhm,
right? And
mhm.
they're talking about why and all of that. You, unbeknownst to you,
Yes.
but and the way that you make yourself that person who they want on the island is by your performance, your leadership, your ability, I used to say, to shape fog, seeing what needs to get done, getting it done, and getting it done in the right way without someone having to have to hold your hand. That's
Hmm.
what leaders and managers look for. They
Hmm.
they look for the job that you're in and you're doing it well, but they also look at are you ready for the next job? Are you ready for the next challenge? Are you ready for the next opportunity experience?
Mm-hmm.
And so as they're looking at you, they're going to either decide whether they're going to sponsor you or not.
Mm-hmm.
And when they do decide that they're going to sponsor you, they're doing it unbeknownst to you. And a lot of times,
Yeah.
um, in those discussions where it's very critical when they're talking about the next level of leadership or the next generation of talent.
So the one other thing that I would add to that, I agree with everything you've said on sponsorship, is that there are many organizations, and this is important for you to find out, especially at the Fortune 500 and the Fortune 100 level, where if I'm the executive, yes, I'm to sponsor, but I am being held, part of my performance review is how many individuals did I sponsor and how many people did I fight for, right? So that it's not just, we're not all opera singers, me, I, right? I'm actually advocating for people who are in the
Mm-hmm.
room. And
Mm-hmm.
part of my advancement as a leader and how I'm being graded against my performance is, am I lifting people up and bringing them forward? So really important in your organization to find out if that's the case, because it just means that people are more incentivized to do it. And then it gives you an opportunity to think about, and that was the second part of my question, how do you build that relationship so that someone does say, you know what, I want to sponsor Celeste. She's pretty phenomenal and I want to sponsor her.
You you build it by this is not something you can do in smoke and mirrors. It just isn't. You have to have a solid historical history of good performance, great performance. You have to be that person who raises their hand when there's a project or an assignment or initiative that comes up that's not really easy, that's a little bit challenging and difficult, but you raise your hand and say, you know what, I'd like to take that on.
Mhm.
Um, you are so making yourself building your from a performance standpoint, you're doing your job and you're doing it well, but you're also willing to take on additional sort of projects or initiatives or responsibilities that are going to get you visibility, yes, but also they're looking at you and saying they're ready for the next move. They
Mhm.
really, they're not just doing the role of a manager or director, they're doing a role of an executive director, of a senior director.
Mhm.
Um, and okay, that's good. Volunteering for, I'll do the, not in a performative way, but volunteering to lead a group project, or because if you're leading the group project, a lot of times you're the one who's presenting in the senior level meetings as well. So getting exposure, because at there's preparation and then there's opportunity at those crossroads. That's where you start to see the success, and you start to see I'm getting the exposure, and especially for marginalized groups of people, because
Mhm.
they're sitting around and they're doing all of these jobs and responsibilities and these projects, and they're all these lateral moves, and then all of a sudden, and they're building up this strong stable of skills and capabilities, and then all of a sudden somebody sees them, either they do a presentation at a meeting or something like that, and it's like, wow, where did they come from? This person's really, really good. I think that a lot of thought into what they've been presenting. We asked follow-up questions. They seemed to know what they were talking about. They had a grounded sort of command of the information. They understood it from soup to nuts, and not in the minute details, but they could explain it to me like I was a sixth grader,
Right.
and it made sense. So all of those things make you have to make sure that you're doing a lot of those different things, not just sort of hiding in your job,
Mhm.
and you got to take that leap, and you got to take that risk.
Okay. Okay. All right. Really last question. For anyone listening right now that feels like the system isn't built for me and they're
Mhm.
struggling with this, what's one thing that you want them to walk away with knowing?
I want them to walk away knowing that you add value, you have skills, you have capabilities, you have experiences, you have you the essence of you is valuable. If you don't feel like it is valued in this organization that you're in, there are how many other organizations out there? that um, you can go to, or think about, hey, a lot of things, and this is really happening with Black women now, where, due to the economic situation, due to all the layoffs, all this, you see a lot of disproportionately Black women that have lost their jobs over the last 2 or 3 years. A lot of those women are saying, you know what, I don't want to go back into the corporate environment. I'm going to start my own thing, or I'm going to join other colleagues and we'll start something together, or I'm going to go to a smaller organization. There are choices that you have where you can feel valued and bring that value. And if someone doesn't accept you in XYZ organization, go to ABC
Yeah.
organization or start your own.
Yeah. I think that's a great place. It also reminds me of what my grandmother used to always say, go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. So
Yeah.
if
Oh,
it
that's
works, if it
beautiful.
works for you, or we realize that it is a privilege to be able to find another job or quit a job. So if that works for you and your and your family and your dynamics, yes, but understand whether it's now or eventually, if it's not working for you, go to find the places that you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated.
I
Celeste,
love
thank you so
that.
much. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation and really getting into some of the nuances of all of this. If you have questions, everyone, please email us at hello@jillgriffincoaching.com. We will get them to Celeste. We will bring her back. I'm sure she will come back. I haven't asked her, but I'm going to guess that she'll come back if we ask her to.
Uh, yes, of
And
course.
I really appreciate you being here. So everyone have a really great week. Be intentional. Really think through, what does equity mean within your department, your organization, for yourself. And as always, 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 always be kind. I'll see you soon.